All right, you wouldn't know that summer is right around the corner. It's pouring, just pouring rain today. All the little microcars are getting wet. Not much I can do about it. Stella's nowhere to be found. She's sleeping, trying to stay dry. And we're working in the shop, trying to keep from getting wet. Rain is blowing in. What are we working on today? This is a 4Runner. It's an older one. 2004 4Runner. And the most common problem that I see on these things is actually not a big deal, but they get more miles on them. This one's got 190,000 miles. Usually the inner CV boot breaks. Let's see if we can see the crack in this one. Get my light in there. You see that? Split right there. I got this side apart already. You can see the CV boot's really torn. It's right there. Customer said there's a bunch of clunking going on in the front end. I bet there is. So to do this job actually isn't too hard. You got to get the brake caliper off and supported, the brake rotor off, pop the cover off, get the nut off, take your special tool, pop the tie rod. There's 2 bolts under here that loosen up the ball joint. This swings out of the way, and then you just kind of hammer the joint out with these little ledges here. You can put a pry bar from the middle and pop that out. I've been doing axles and CV joints for a long time, to the point where I remember a long time ago when you bought a replacement CV kit, you got a boot and some grease and you had to undo it yourself. Nowadays, check this out, they're new. I mean, for $100 or whatever, you get a brand new inner and outer joint, new boots, extra grease, instructions. There's no core charge, there's no nothing. It's crazy. I remember, doing the boots. You know, you take the old axle out, you'd put the boots on, you'd spend an hour with the thing in the vise trying to separate the balls from the cradle, from the big mess, and then putting it all back together, clamping it, hoping you got it all in there right. And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. Then to going to the core system, the rebuilt ones, where you take the old ones off and send them back for core, and now new for cheaper than they've ever been. These might have been $79. I don't know. They're super cheap. But anyhow, we're going to make this guy happy, stop all the clunking in his front end, and just a quick shot of what's going on today. These are really, really good rigs. I love these 4Runners. They got the 4.0 liter engine with the VVTi, super powerful. Like I said, this one's got almost 200,000 miles on it. You would never know it. It's really clean and nice. Let's get to putting these axles in, and maybe we'll go for a little drive and just show you how nice these things are. Okay, so you can see I've got a little front differential oil leaking down into my pan. I've got this axle popped out, and I didn't actually have to hammer on it. I just got in here with a pry bar and just, you can see there, pried gently against the case and got some good leverage against one of these knobs, and it popped right out. And this joint is knackered. It's just looser than a goose. Let's pull it out and we'll compare it to the new one. Okay, we got our axle joint out, or I should say our axle shaft. This is the old one here, and this is the new one. And you can see there's a little difference with this kind of hub assembly, or the case assembly of where the balls go in. I don't think that really matters. I think as long as this part and this part matches up, that's really what's important. Also, you want to really be careful of these threads. Actually, any of the threads that you're working with, but especially the threads on the end of your axle shaft. If you hammer trying to put it in or pull it out or whatever, and you boog these threads up, you've ruined it, everything. So be very careful. So the threads on this need to be protected, as well as the threads on like the tie rod end and or any of the bolt threads that, you know, for the ball joint. Just be careful. Sometimes you can get really amped up and lots of testosterone flowing trying to get this thing apart, because they're sometimes stuck or rusted. This one's not, but you just gotta be careful with threads. Believe me, you'll save lots of time. So let's put this in, and then we'll work the other side. There was one more thing I forgot to mention. So this brand new axle assembly, the whole thing end to end, $72 my cost. And I think I was saying before, back in the 80s, the only cars that had CV axles were Hondas. So Honda Civics and Accords. And I did hundreds, possibly thousands of them. But you'd separate them. You'd undo the clamps on the small end, the big end, like this. Get that old boot off there. Make sure and clean up the balls and the cages. Put it in a vise. You'd spend 4 hours putting new boots on. And the boots were 30 or 40 bucks a piece. So it's about the same cost, but so much less time involved. I mean, if you wrap up 4 hours into just rebuilding an axle, that's a lot of time. And, you know, I couldn't charge for that. So this is a way better way to go. So for a couple $100, the guy gets a new axle per side. That's a pretty good deal. Just a little footnote there for you. Okay, so we're doing the other side of our Toyota 4Runner, and I just noticed something, and this is something that you guys can check on your own cars. It's just good, good security. So the brake calipers have 1, 2, 3, 4 pistons, and this side went back really easy to get the pads out. You can see I'm pushing that back, and it kind of makes this one come out. But that one goes in pretty easy. But on this side, they are stuck. There's no way that piston's going back in. And look at the rust on there. They've been in one spot for a long time, or this car's been sitting for a long time, but that's a bunch of reduced braking or stopping power, and that's a safety issue. So we're going to replace these calipers. The customer doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to order some and just do it because that ain't right. So the next thing we got to do is get the rotor off, get the caliper off, and then we can pop this axle out and we'll freshen up this whole front of this thing. This car must have been sitting for a while. So on removing this tie rod end on this side of the car, you don't want to boog the threads up. You're going to reuse it. I've had this tool for a long time. I don't know where I got it. It's not specific to this car. I think it's just a universal tie rod tool, but it doesn't allow you to break the boot, and it doesn't peen over or boog up the threads. It just sort of slides on there. I can do this with one hand here. Here, let me get it set up. In this particular car, it goes in at an angle like this. You can see that some of the grease has kind of smooshed out of the boot when I pushed it down, and that these tongs or fingers go on the spindle, and then the nipple on the bottom of the threaded part fits into the divot on the top of the tie rod end. So when you crank this down, it should all pop. Let's do that. And it should be damage free. It's going to make a pop. It's really tight. Come on, baby. Pop. Okay, so we got the tie rod to pop, and we got the old axle to pop, and we're putting the new one back in there. Let's see if we can line it up. You want to use a rubber hammer on this. Don't use a steel hammer. Okay, so I used my rubber hammer to get my axle back into place. It's also a good idea to put your nut on so you don't damage the threads. And another great tip is to make the axle as straight as possible. You want to transfer the force from where you're hitting here with the hammer to inserting the stub into the drive flange or the spline shaft hole, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so we're still working on our Project 4Runner. I got all the wheels off now. I checked the rear brakes to make sure they're not seized up. They're a little rusty, but they're fine. And we got both drive axles in now, all buttoned up. Those look so good. There's a new one there and a new one there. All the boots are intact. I want to check the front differential oil because we leaked a little bit out. Maybe change that out, and then I got to change the brakes. This caliper has a sticky piston right here, will not retract, and on this side there's two sticky pistons, the calipers right here. And the reason I know that is, let's see, I'll show you the brake pads. One brake pad has, this one is thin and the other one is much thicker. Put them together there. You can see the differences. That came off the same caliper. That means that the one side is working real hard. It's working twice as hard as the other. You gotta stay sharp. Look out for your customers. Brakes are nothing you want to fool with. When you need them, you need them.